Welcome back. What's good, homies? Welcome back to the Drafts and Drafts podcast. I'm Joe, aka Sultan. This is Dave, aka Disaster. It's Wednesday, April 10th, and today we're doing part 3 of our roster review series. This time featuring some of the playoff teams from our one quarterback league from this past season. But before we do, Dave, are you feeling better? Did you get a chance to see the eclipse? What's going on with you?
Good evening. I was able to see the eclipse. We saw about 98% of it. So we never actually got to get great pictures or take the glasses fully off and stare at the sun. Kind of bummed we didn't just drive because we could have been there in like 2.5 hours and done that. But
I'm surprised you didn't stare directly at it. It seems like a Dave move.
I tried a couple times, but the sun won. And so I got a little dizzy, got a little just
About the
blind.
sun.
Yeah. And no, we did that. And I feel a little bit better. I should be. I'm almost 100% done. Still on some medications, but we're recovering. I finally can breathe a little bit, not coughing as much. So excited to do the podcast. I'm a little tired. I think you said you're a little tired in the pre-show. So for us, we're gonna have to just rally each other back. And for the people that are watching or listening, thank you. But for us, this is putting in reps. You know what they say is consistency, consistency, consistency. If you want to do something, build that routine. We're building this routine. We're doing it weekly. I am not to rub it in Joe. Like I am infinitely more busy than Joe. So for me, this is like people are like, don't do this podcast. Like this is just another 2 hours you don't have. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have it. But you know what? I've wanted to do a podcast. Joe is willing to do a lot of the external heavy lifting of staging out our videos and thumbnails and a bunch of other crap that just people just don't like to actually do in the podcast game. And so when he's willing to pick up that slack, I mean, for me to come on and talk football for an hour or two every week is great.
Oh, yeah, Dave nailed it. I definitely have a lot of extra time. For those of you who don't know me, I used to have a small business where I had less time. Unfortunately, we went out of business last year, RIP baseball swag. But you know what? With one door closing, another one opens. So I'm very thankful to have good guidance by my co-host Dave. And it's always fun yucking it up, and it's a good way for us to kind of catch up on a regular basis, since we do live 1,500 miles apart. But with that being said, speaking of, getting those reps in, it's time for another draft review. And I figure with the eclipse happening this week, I got a great one I wanted to go through with you guys. I have another Treehouse beer. It's called the Treehouse Don't Be Afraid. But most importantly, the can art again is just immaculate. I don't know if you can see it at home. There's a big glare off my.
We gotta get that light off.
Yeah, the light's off. Still can't really make out the quality of it, but it's a beautiful view of the skyline. It's an oil painting, if you will. It kind of reminds me of what maybe you could have seen if you were in the path of totality for the eclipse on Monday. It is a New Zealand double IPA. I think this is a new edition of beers that they have going. And so I'll give it a crack. And then before I try it, I'll let you break down what you have.
Good crack. Well, given that today I've been saving this beer, not that it's a spectacular beer. It's a pretty solid beer. I've had it before, but it's got a little bit of my team in it. And so the brewery is Great Raft. The beer is called Grace and Grit. And that's how I win championships. That's how I play football games.
That can looks awesome.
With Grace and Grit. And so double IPA. And yeah, we'll do a little quick crackaroo.
Oh, what a frosty crack.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, you didn't cheers me. Whatever.
Oh, it's still good.
New Zealand? Was New Zealand even in the path of the eclipse? I don't think so. But you know what? It's too late now.
No, I think it was dark there when the eclipse happened. But
you're probably is that how time zones work?
we'll let that one slide. This beer to me is fantastic. It's a 4.5 out of 5. It's just for me, it's probably one of the best beers that I can get. They're out of Louisiana, and they're one of the best beers that I can get locally that's just sold in shops. So for me, 4.5 out of 5. And this was brewed in December and still tastes great. So
that's awesome. Yeah, let me give mine another Sounds good. Definitely not as good as the one I had last time. No disrespect. I guess I'd give it a 3.5. It's not bad. It's definitely not one I'm gonna go reaching for again. And if I finish it tonight, I'll be impressed because I'm a little tired. But that being said, head on to our our first segment. Uh the new segment,
OTQ.
the OTQ, one tough question. So Dave, I tasked you with coming up with one this week. I'm excited to see what you have for me.
Yeah. So my question is, and this episode is basically going to be about me and my team. And so, just so everyone that's listening, you're going to hear a lot about the Board Apes, the Bentonville Board Apes, but it can pertain to plenty of other people. And so, my team is getting older. I believe this season we can still be very competitive. I think we can make the playoffs easy, assuming health maintains. And I think I'd have a good run at the championship this season again with my current core. The challenge is I don't know where that's going to happen or look like next season. I think, again, if injuries start to happen, I don't think they're going to come back because they're older. And I'm trying to decide right now, how do I maximize value? And so the question that I've wanted to pose is, I've started to shop around some guys and I have interest from a few, and I have their offers. They're not terrible offers. They're not the offer of what I want. And the assumption is, right, during the offseason, we're pre-draft, pre NFL draft, pre our rookie draft. The value of these old vets is just going to be less than week 4, week 5, week 8 of the season when they're performing and doing other stuff. But obviously, there's risk of injury. There's so many other risks of draft positions happening, all this other stuff that might happen. And so the question I wanted to pose is, as you're evaluating these older guys, is it better to take the trade you can get right now that is your maximum value of current standing? You farmed it to everybody. You know where the league essentially stands in valuing these assets. You have a couple offers. Accepting your best offer there, if it's, say, we'll call it 80% of what you're expecting to get, hopefully in the end, or is it better to hold out, either try to win that championship one more time and then like literally have nothing going into that offseason potentially, or wait out and try to see if you can get maximum value for them mid-season if you decide to go that route. So it's really just trying to say, okay, you have this strong team, you have these good players, or even if you don't have a strong team, so you just have good players. Like we had some teams last year farming out trying to get rid of Keenan Allen or Adam Thielen at some point too. What is that best path forward? And especially if you're getting a relatively fair offer, it's not like you're getting 50% of value like some people in the league will accept. But you got a pretty good fair offer. What are your thoughts on how you'd evaluate and make those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big one to unpack. I think first you already touched on it. Like now is probably the least valuable every point scoring player over the age of 28 will be this year for a multitude of reasons. One, it's not point scoring season, and two, right now everybody's teams on paper are healthy. So like right now, I have 3 running backs and a good handcuff. Right now, uh,
Such a good point. Didn't even
it,
think about that way.
right. So like right now, when I look at my team, if you said, Joe, what are you going to give me for Derrick Henry? What I would pay nothing to for a backup. Basically, he would go on my bench. So it's like, why would I pay anything for Derrick Henry right now? So it already removes me as a person who would buy Henry. That already is lowering the demand for Henry today. Now, training camp rolls around. A Chain somehow gets hurt. Can't believe he might get hurt, but let's just say the off chance he does. um, Fragile 180-pound boy gets hurt. Now all of a sudden I'm down to 2 running backs, and now I got to worry about bye week plugins, and one thing leads to another, and some now all of a sudden the value of Henry goes up a little bit by virtue of other starting running backs getting hurt. You also do run the risk of Henry himself getting hurt, and he's at the point now where if Henry gets hurt again, his value is 0 permanently. You might get a fourth,
Yeah.
so it's a risk reward. Whereas like if you want to sell now, I think this is just again I like that we're doing these OTQs raw. So I don't have any. This was not a prepared remark. I have no idea what was.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of this all on the spot. And I think if you're going to try to make a trade, you have to be ready to commit fully in that direction if you're going to try to trade those guys now. You can't do a half baked, okay, I'll trade just Henry for what I can get. Then you're like, well, what do you your team's already at this weird, like, I am competitive. Why would you take the 207 for Henry? Like, even though he's probably worth like maybe the whatever, it's the 111, the 203, something in that range, you're not in a position where you need to get value unless you're prepared to say, I am tearing it down. Then in that case, you do say, once I get my own first back, then I take what I can get for everybody else because it doesn't matter. If anything, Henry, you could sell Henry for thirds if you really wanted to because you don't need him on your roster whatsoever. And your goal is now to maximize your future value, which you can't do with Henry. Carries no future value. We don't know. He's on a 2-year contract, so he technically does have future value. But you know what I mean? Where
Yeah,
the thirds can go up, Henry probably doesn't. So
yep.
I think if you're gonna just try to sell one piece, it doesn't really make sense to me. And it's a really good question. But yeah, what's your thought, or do you want to save it for your roster review since it's probably a lot of the same questions that you're going to have to talk about when we talk about the team?
No, I think well, I'd say at this juncture I haven't accepted it because I'm in that fallacy of even if it gets rid of a lot of those older players, I still don't think the value is correct. And I think that it's also for me the other thing I'm trying to balance out that the only piece you didn't quite mention was like it's not like the opportunity cost is just having an old guy that I might just lose a roster spot. The opportunity cost is winning a championship at best value to tearing down rebuild and trying to build the dynasty again that I can win in 2 years or 3 years back with this team. And so that's kind of the evaluation where I'm at right now. I'm like, okay, on to your point, no one's hurt yet. It's not like Saquon just tore his ACL or whatever it was. We're at this position where which you actually said really good that I didn't think about, like everyone's team is healthy right now. And so the only people I really approached were like, hey, you have running back issues or you could use another wide receiver, whatever it is. And so I think you said it really well in that vein that I hadn't thought of. And you're right that like once one of those older guys gets hurt, or say a couple of my younger guys get hurt, and I'm like, oh, my team's not quite as competitive now, it might be time to sell those guys. And hopefully you have someone hurt, 2 other teams have people hurt, that I'm just like, okay, yeah, there's actually some desire for these guys because they're still healthy and they can help your team right now win. Whereas my team doesn't have the rest of the pieces healthy around, and I'm not going to go acquire people. But that's a really good perspective too. So
yeah, and it's like for the right price, I would buy any player like that just for the sheer fact that I hate trading from a position of need. I would rather spend a little extra above market value now to go get a piece that I think is going to insulate my roster come regular season, which is why like last season I spent a second and a third on Amari Cooper around this time. Because I was like, hey, I don't need him because on paper I had 4 starting wide receivers, whatever it was. Like I had my lineup full, but Dan was offering a good price, and I was like, I'll buy him now, and then God forbid Calvin Ridley stinks or JSN is a bust or Drake London comes out slow, which all 3 of them happened, and sure enough, Amari Cooper is in my lineup every fucking week. So it's like those are the type of deals I would make as a contender because I unlike some other managers in our league, I really value depth because I never want to be coming to you in week 5 when I have 2 running backs go down and you're 1-4. I'm like, Dave, what do you want for Henry? And you're like, that 25 first looks really juicy right now. And I'm like, fuck you. Like, I don't want to trade a first for Henry, but you're the only one willing to give me a reasonable deal on a starting running back. So I would, if you were saying, Joe, you know what, I'm tearing it down, I'll give you Henry for a future second and a third. I might just say done. Like I'll take Henry. I'll take the risk of him losing value for the safety of my team. But again, like you said, we're saying or highlighting or echoing was everyone's roster. Everyone feels good about their players right now. Even after the NFL draft, we're going to have a little bit more clarity on who's a starter and who isn't. Like right now, I know we've talked about them a lot. The Zamir White owner thinks he's got a starter. The Pacheco owner thinks he has a starter. The Rashad White owner thinks he has a starter. Like all of us think we have starting running backs until Tank Bigsby goes to the Jaguars, and now all of a sudden it's a timeshare. That last year when Zach Charbonnet got drafted to the Seahawks, there was a huge buying opportunity on Ken Walker because everyone thought he was going to get killed by Charbonnet. Second round draft pick got both nothing. So a lot's going to change in the next couple of weeks, but unless you're committed to fully tearing it down, I don't believe in selling vets right now unless it's as part of a deal for another vet. Like if you could turn Henry into Joe Mixon somehow because you really liked Mixon and get a year younger, it's kind of a lateral move. Unless you're committing to the rebuild, it doesn't seem like you're going to get the right value.
So
not
hopefully,
you personally, you in general.
Yeah, so I have some comments on that, but hopefully I'll save them for my team when it comes up. I'll make note of it so that I can bring it up.
Awesome. Well, then, with that being said, let's move to our first roster review. So we have the Ludlow Snapping Turtles. As you can probably sense from the tail end of our previous pod, we're getting to the mid teams, if you will. We've gone through a few teams that hovered around 500, and we have another team that's snuck into playoffs a couple times, and their career winning percentage is 47%. So that, going through their placements, they've come in 7th, 5th, 9th, 8th, and 6th. So they've never made it out of the wild card round, and they've made pretty deep runs in the consolation bracket, apparently. So they're always a bridesmaid, never a bride. Actually, that probably applies more to Gilday's team, now that I think about it. But moving on to their roster.
They're always at the wedding, never a groomsman.
Yeah, this is even worse. This is worse than Gilday's team. What am I doing?
Yeah, so they're always at the wedding. There's never a groomsman.
Yeah. So here's looking at their roster in 2021. We're going to go through again, kind of the same structure. Go through their roster previously 3 years ago, where their roster is today, some trades they've made, and then review kind of what we would do if we took the team over. So 3 years ago, they had rookie Justin Herbert closing out a really strong season as their quarterback. They had what looked like a pretty strong running back room with Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs. Jacobs was 22 at the time. Mixon was 25, like prime running backs. They had Keenan Allen and Allen Robinson were their wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins was on IR, who was 28 at the time. So Keenan and D-Hop and Allen, being 28 years old, are essentially in their prime as well. And then you look at their draft capital. They had 3 2022 firsts, 2 2022 seconds. They had an extra 23 first, and their full suite of 2024 picks. So not only do they have a pretty strong core of starters of like 5 or 6, but they also had a ton of draft capital, which I'm not sure how they even got all that draft capital, to be honest. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out in the trade slide. Fast forward to 2024. They still have Herbert and Jordan Love now as their quarterbacks, still riding the back of Joe Mixon in their running back room, but they also have Ken Walker. And I know they have a couple. They had Damian Pierce, I believe, which I might have cut out. Or is he on this roster? He might be on the. Doesn't matter. I don't see him. Their wide receivers are Garrett Wilson, Michael Pittman, still DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen. Oh, they have Raheem Mostert, who I don't mean to overlook because he was running back 2 last year. They have some potential on the bench. They have Jameson Williams. They have Elijah Moore, a couple guys who are former first-round rookie picks that just haven't panned out yet. And then looking at their draft capital, they have the 105 and 203 this year, along with an extra 2025 first, but no other picks in 2025. So they've made some trades. We've actually touched on them in a previous episode. They made that huge Cam Akers deal where they gave up 2 firsts and a second to get Cam Akers and a different second back. Let's go to their other trades that are on here. On the right is a couple trades that we already covered, the Cam Akers trade and the Josh Jacobs for Damian Pierce trade, where they required 2 firsts and Damian Pierce for Josh Jacobs in a second, essentially. I do have a couple other trades on here. Some simple ones where they traded away CeeDee Lamb in his rookie year for Keenan Allen in the 2022 first. And they traded away Leonard Fournette for a 2022 first. So that's how they got those extra 22 firsts, which turned into Ken Walker, Garrett Wilson, and Jameson Williams. So that was a pretty good class for them. Walker's a sturdy RB. Wilson's a potential future stud. Hasn't done it yet, but you got to anticipate that he's going to break out eventually. I hope. Seems talented enough, but yeah, going back to his 2024 roster, Dave, what are your thoughts here? You look at the roster. What are the core pieces you would say you build around? Do you think this is a playoff team this year? Like, this was a current playoff team last year. Do you think they have what it takes to run it back again? Like,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of question marks. Just a lot of question marks, unfortunately. Like, I think their core pieces you're not worried about at all right now are to be. Well, I guess from a starting perspective, and I can't say they're elite. The only elite person in here that I'm saying is elite, 100% guaranteed going into this season is Garrett Wilson. Nothing else in this roster is like I'm banking to be a top 12 anything.
Well, and it's funny because Garrett Wilson has still never had a top 12 season, but yet we consider him the surest thing to be elite, which is just it's ironic.
Well, I think the surest thing to be close to elite. And you're also expecting that he's going to have his best quarterback he's ever had, which is a kind of more of an assumption. And we think Aaron Rodgers is going to be good, but I'm assuming like he's going to have his best quarterback. There's no reason he can't have a top 12 season after he's been 21 and I think like 25 or 26. So I feel good about Garrett Wilson, but sure, say he's even if he's not a wide receiver one, put it this way, then their team has no top 12 anything guaranteed going into the season. That's the problem with this team because the team has a lot of top 24s and even top 36s. Like there's no one starting, even some bench. He even has some bench players that are going to be top 36 of their position. And so that's great. Depth wise, that's awesome. It's funny. When we were talking through the OTQ, I thought of my other question. It was actually around a depth versus star player trade off kind of things. This team is that team that needs to start acquiring stars. And I don't mean stars like that to be a big name, but they have to be like like you need to have if you actually want to win championships. I don't know the number, and I wanted to actually compare this to and go through and do some data. So maybe I'll try to do this for our next show if I can find any time. If not, I'm going to put it on you. But I want to know in our championships through the five seasons we've done, what were the rankings of the players that won the season? Like how many top 12s, how many top 24s, what were the position ranks? Because I think that's something that for people to really consider as they're evaluating how good can their team be, right? Raheem Mostert was a stud last year. I don't know if he's going to be a stud this year. Okay, maybe he can be top 12, but I'm not banking on it. George Kittle easily could be top 12. He could also be 15. Michael Pittman could be top 12. He could also be 24 if Anthony Richardson's not throwing the ball a ton or he's just using other players, Josh Downs, whatever. Ken Walker, Joe Mixon in the same boat. Then you also have other factors too, like on the bench, like Keenan Allen's going to a new team with DJ Moore. That's, arguably a good wide receiver there too. With what's going to be a rookie quarterback, if he's slinging it like CJ Stroud, Keenan Allen's going to be great. If he's not, Keenan Allen's going to fucking suck. And so there's a lot, and there's just so many of those things. Curtis Samuel could be good. Like there's just a lot of pieces on his team collectively that you're like, to me, it's actually funny. There's a lot of tradable assets on this team. And if I'm him, he's done the pick route a lot. And unfortunately for him, he's missed a lot on his picks. He's had some good ones. He's had some bad ones for sure, especially in the early rounds. And so I might start to try to double down. Like, what could he get for Ken Walker and Keenan Allen? Could he get a top 12 running back? Or for same thing, Joe Mixon and Keenan Allen to give someone else some depth? Would they be willing to part ways with another person? And I think the challenge for him, I don't think outside, because I don't think Ken Walker's situation is going to get worse. Joe Mixon's, I don't necessarily think it's going to get worse either. Just through the draft, at least, is what I'm talking about. Raheem Mostert's might. But most of the players, at least in the starting lineup, I don't think they're going to be factored too much from the draft. And so I think that that's the chance for him is right after the draft, before the season starts. That's a key trading opportunity. Like, all right, my guys are projected to be the starter, but they're older. They're maybe not projected to be top 12. They're projected to be 15 to 20. Let's try to make a deal there and parting with two of them to try to get that alpha. And then hopefully, I think every team needs to have that luck where Joe Mixon is a top 8 running back or Ken Walker is one of the two. And Jordan Love is a QB top 6, whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
And so I think that breakdown, you need a little bit of luck, but like who I'd bet is going to do that, if anybody, is going to be top 12 is going to be Love, Wilson, Kittle, are like my 3 that are probably, but there's just so many yellow flags to really know what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with a lot of he's got a lot of good, strong pieces that are so valued so differently. They're not a lot of similar pieces. Like you have the high hopeful Wilson. He hasn't done it yet, but he's so hopeful. I think he's probably a top 5 or top 10 wide receiver in startups right now. Then you have Michael Pittman, who's like old reliable, a top 15, 20 receiver. He's still in the middle age, but he's not a young, sexy stud anymore. But he's also not an old head like DeAndre Hopkins. And then he has solid contributors like Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins that are worth way more to his team than they are on the trade market. And I hate to say it, Austin, but you guys need to like. This is where it's like I think trade calculators are whack, but sometimes it's useful for a reality check because they're not worth firsts. They're barely worth seconds. Like I think you'd struggle to trade Keenan Allen straight up to anybody in the league for the 206. And thinking you're going to combine Keenan Allen with Joe Mixon and go get the 103 is a delusional trade offer. And I think that's like you have to be willing to say, you know what, if I really want to improve my team, maybe you combine Keenan Allen with the 203 and go get the 110. Oh my God, why would I pay Keenan Allen to move up 5 picks? I'm like, that's probably the price to move up from 203 to move up 5 spots, probably cost you another second. And that's what Keenan Allen's probably worth. That's and it's a weird dynamic to think about because you're like, oh, it's only 5 spots. And it's like, but it is the right to choose 5 other players in your draft that could be more valuable. Like, and I don't have in front of me every 110 versus every 203, but I'm going to guess statistically speaking, the 110 busts a lot less than the 203. And that's a way, or, instead of trying to package up Keenan Allen and Michael Pittman to go get Justin Jefferson, settle on going to get a guy just barely ahead of what Pittman's value is. Pair Pittman and Allen to go get Chris
Devonta
Olave.
Smith.
Yeah, Devonta Smith. Move up two wide receiver spots. It sounds like you're losing a ton of value here, but in our league where the lineups are so small and our benches are actually pretty adequate, it's like it's really hard to fill out your lineup without seemingly overpaying. Like I know we went over the Jamar Chase trade already. I'm not going to break it down again, but like in a vacuum, I gave up a ton of value to bump up my starting lineup spot by what? 3 or 4 more points per game. But like I still on paper gave up a ton of value to do that. And I think this team would benefit a lot more by conceding some value and giving up on the dream that DeAndre Hopkins and Allen are still worth first round picks and settle for seconds.
Can you also go to his trades? I just noticed a trend, I think. So he very drastically overvalues age and done it before a lot as opposed to youth. And so I feel like he's trading a lot.
You mean production versus youth? Like he gives up youth for production?
Not necessarily. It's like, again, in the vacuum at the time,
Keenan Allen and a first
CeeDee
for
Lamb, Keenan Allen first for Lamb. But then also going to sell Julio for first and 2 seconds. Like his value of the older guys tends to be, it seems like, where it's like, oh, well, like they're freaking Keenan Allen. Like they're, I forget the other old guy on his team, the wide receiver, but
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, D-Hop. It's DeAndre Hopkins. It's like, yeah, I know he's like a Hall of Famer and like he's had some amazing, runs. But at the same time, the value of him and even like Jalen Reed, like they're the same. Like it's in the dynasty format. Who's going to be here in 3 years? Reed's going to be here. I don't know if D-Hop's going to be in the league in 3 years. And so it's the way that he's viewing things, I think. And I've been trying to figure out like how is he calculating some of these things? And it seems like he's calculating where a little bit more on that age side, or if they've like proven it to be so good for at least a full season or 2 seasons, whatever it is. It's that or being a Jet. He just really overvalues it to a point that it's like, because I bet you he thinks Garrett Wilson is like 10 receivers ahead of Olave, and they're probably back to back.
They should be back to back.
And Drake London pretty close too, actually.
Yeah, those 3 actually should probably be back to back to back because none of them have really proved anything, and other than just sheer.
Well, and in this season, arguably Drake London's going into the best situation. So like maybe last year they weren't, but this year going into it, yeah, Drake London's 100% in that same conversation, and I bet you, you practical dynasty managers like that's probably about the same value. But for him, it's like no, Garrett Wilson's way ahead of them.
At this time,
so it's a big question mark there too.
Garrett Wilson managers in general are a little delusional. I remember at this time last year, Garrett Wilson was wide receiver 3 in like startups, and you could get Drake London and a first for Garrett Wilson at some point. It's like there's just this real hope.
Well, no, that's 2 different things though. I mean, you had Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets, hyped up, and on Hard Knocks, going through the point thing where this is going to be 40 TDs. Aaron Rodgers is going to be a peak season, and then you have and Garrett Wilson is going to get 20 of them, and then you have Drake London with like Mariota or who you never know who's going to be his quarterback with the Falcons. And it's like, well, you have this whole terrible experiment, Arthur Smith. They're still like, so I understand that value disassociation last season, 100%. I'm coming to this season though. It's hard to not look at the situations of all of them. And sure, Garrett Wilson might be the leader of the pack, but I might even go Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Olave. But again, that mosh of them, they're not different in value. Like they are the same. So whatever we value as a league for one of those, and if everyone thinks that was undervalued on whatever the trade may be, fine. But it's not like one is drastically ahead of the other depending on whatever side of it is. And there's a few other people you can lump into there too. You could probably put Devonta Smith and put Jalen Waddle in that same camp, and their wide receiver twos in their team because of the goods and bads they've had and the QBs they have. But all that to say, yeah, you can go back to his 2024 team. I think that's exactly it. And I think he can get some. I really wish we had the 2023 season team. It's probably pretty much the same thing, but minus Pittman.
I can probably remember most of it.
I think it's just this team minus Pittman, right?
Minus Pittman
to end, because it's just to end the season. But
yep,
you look at that and it's like he should have done this last season. He could have gotten really good value last season. And so that's kind of the thing. Like also you now have you still have Justin Herbert, you still have Jordan Love. Like you can do something one of them if you want. Geno is still playing, and especially in our one QB league, you don't really need a stud backup QB. Like for me, I'm shopping all of my QBs.
Yeah, it's hard to sell though because like nobody wants a stud backup QB.
Well, no, to hopefully be someone's starter QB. Like if I have Tua and Brock, and then I have Rodgers as my bench, like Rodgers can be my bench player. That's fine. And if he goes off, he'll start. But I'm okay with either Brock or Tua. But if you don't have a Brock or Tua and your starters are worse than that, he has the same opportunity here where, well, unfortunately, Herbert's value is down, but Jordan Love's value is way up. And so potentially you could sell Love for more than get max value for Love right now.
That's
ride
really
it with
creative.
Herbert and then get something else in your team to be better. Like, I don't know how many more points per game Love is going to have over Herbert. He could be crazy good. Like I think Love could be top 5. I also think Herbert could be top 5 depending on how the draft goes. But all of these pieces, he has so many decent players. Like they're not going to say like mid because it sounds bad, but they really are that mid-tier players where like they're all startable. They're all good. They all should be on someone's lineup starting week 1 of the season.
Yeah.
They just shouldn't all be in the same lineup.
I think it goes back to kind of your OTQ, which was he has too many players that are right now worthless. I'm not truly worthless, but like it sounds awful, but I wouldn't even pay the 312 for Raheem Mostert right now because
he's a bad version of my team. He's the worst older version of my team with minimal young players. I mean, the youngest player is Wilson, and then Pittman.
The good thing is, like you said, because he has so much depth, he'll be able to weather an injury storm. I think he has this team. Him. I don't mean to say he. They. It's actually a co-managed team with Austin Lavett and his father, Howard. They have They have the roster to weather injuries, and this trying to sell D-Hop, Mostert, or Keenan Allen for anything more than a third. I'm sorry, you're just not going to get it right now. Okay, open season starts. Rashee Rice is suspended for whatever, and Tank Dell breaks his other leg, and like all of a sudden you're like, okay, fine, I'll give you one of my seconds for Keenan Allen and just plug it in because you're committing to it. But right now, like because everyone's healthy and no one's suspended and no one got beat out in training camp, these guys are quote unquote worthless. They're not actually worthless. These are all really, really strong players to have as bench pieces or depth pieces. It's just hard right now, like we talked about, when everyone thinks their team is healthy and fresh and everyone's optimistic, like you just said. Drake London's going to be a star. Like every Drake London owner out there thinks they have a strong wide receiver 2 right now. When in reality, London might just be pretty average, and Kirk Cousins might stink coming off Achilles. And then halfway through the season, Drake London owner might be like, "Holy fuck, I actually need a real wide receiver 2. I'm going to go buy Keenan Allen for Drake London." Maybe I just say I'm sick of waiting for London to break out. I'll give you London for Keenan Allen in a third.
Well, and that's a challenge here too. Like, what if Caleb Williams is Bryce Young, and what if Keenan Allen is the wide receiver 2?
Don't even manifest that, man.
And what if
Bears fans can't do that?
And what if D-Hop's still with Will Levis, but Will Levis isn't throwing a D-Hop, he's throwing Traylon Burks? Like,
or he's throwing a Calvin Ridley, bro.
Or he's throwing to Tony Pollard, honestly.
Yes,
but like
for Tajay.
Yeah, so that's the other. That's where I think this is the worst version of my team, which we'll get to in a minute. But like, my guys aren't going to lose their starting job. a lot of these guys have
Exactly.
either changed teams or have other young players that are coming up with young QBs or young other options that once
Absolutely.
that draft happens, like
That's
they may
such a
still be
good point.
listed as the wide receiver one, but if that QB has the rapport with, like we saw was a little bit CJ Stroud once Tank Dell kind of hit his stride and got into the season, like Tank Dell almost was a wide receiver one option. Any game he missed though, Nico Collins was the stud. And
Yeah.
so it's a kind of the same thing here. Where like the only person that doesn't have that vulnerability is Wilson. And then Pittman's like kind of doesn't have that vulnerability, and neither does Love or
Agree.
Kittle pretty much. But like everyone else is just so in flux. And then now it's also not these pieces that are like Christian Watson age, or like, they're not juniors and seniors coming into the league. These are like geriatric 30-year-olds that are just, once they lose that starting role, they're not coming back to have that
Well,
role. They're just
you
going to go
brought up a
be an
good point too.
old
Which
vet
I
on the
wasn't
team.
thinking about, which was like Hopkins and Keenan Allen also are one, the oldest they've ever been in the league. Obviously, it's how time works. But two, they're also dealing with the most target competition they've ever had. Never has DeAndre Hopkins had a Calvin Ridley on across from him as playing flanker or whatever the other X receiver is. Never has Keenan Allen had another receiver as good as DJ Moore across from him. It's been
I don't know.
Mike
Mike Williams is
Williams.
pretty good, but
He was good, but DJ
But
Moore
hold
is
on,
a
but I
far
would
more
also
complete
say, and
receiver.
I also say for most recently, it's Ben Herbert, who's a great QB. I don't know how good Caleb Williams is going to be in the NFL.
Right. It's just two things I never had thought about till you brought up the target competition they're going to have. If they show any signs of faltering or slipping or not getting open, is Calvin really now the one in Tennessee, or is it still D Hop? But we don't know. I don't follow them close enough to know. I've never owned either of them, so I've never really watched their game.
Again, there's just so, but like, there's honestly, other than Kenny Pickett, every other player that I see outside of maybe some of the taxi guys, all the players on the left side, all of them are packageable
Yep.
outside of Kenny Pickett. Like Elijah Moore has value right now. Jameson Williams has value right now, and they will also after the draft. Like, and you'll get max value if you put two people together to give that depth or something else to slightly elevate up. And the thing is too, I think one thing I do respect the hell out of Dan as a trader, and he tries to like talk to me about it, but like Dan does think a lot that he can take something and make something else, and then he gets that thing and he can make it something else. He sees trying to make 2-3 trades in a row over 3 weeks.
And he's not afraid to lose a trade.
Yeah, not lose a trade because he also thinks he can go get something else, max value somewhere else, where he just traded 2 seconds for a first. It's like, see, I got 2 firsts for Pittman or whatever it was, or 3, whatever the number was. And I was like, all right, man, like cool, good deal. But ultimately, he didn't get it from the same manager; he got it from 2 different managers, which is cool. That's the opportunity if the Lavis want to take it, Howard and Austin, is go make 6 trades. And maybe you can get up to AJ Brown. I don't know. I don't know what that end goal is, or add Olave to the mix too. But like take Jameson Williams and Ken Walker and go get player X. And then take that player and package them with Keenan Allen and go get player Y. And then package that guy with your 302 and go get player Z. And that player is probably pretty good. It's just you got to build up to that level to kind of get there. And again, there's a lot of risk of that person saying no. So you have to be willing to be flexible and take time to figure out what they need and what their desires are for the season. And that's, I will say, if there's one thing I don't love about our league, and I said up, I think last podcast, I want to still frame it up here, is pick a lane. Know if you're in rebuild mode, know if you're a seller or a buyer. And you can be in the middle of indecisive, like I kind of am right now with my team. If your team objectively on paper is in competition mode, if you're not objectively already in competition mode, like you can play it all out. You just need to know, are you buying or selling, and which would you have the pieces to go build that team? And I wish our league was a little bit more clear about that when they're discussing things, because then you know who your kind of targets are versus having to go farm out to 11 guys and be like, hey, are you interested in this?
We've said enough about the Turtles. Let's move on to the next team. We're moving on to the Port Chester Angry Beavers. So this is a team that started out pretty dreadful in our league, but the last 2 years they've come on real strong. So they started out finishing 9th, 10th, and 8th in our first 3 seasons.
Wait, side note, is this the first team we've had over 50% win record?
No, I think we went through the PME Warrior technically had a
Oh, you're right. Okay.
But then they followed that up with a 10-4 fourth place finish and a 9-5 fifth place finish. And like Dave highlighted, they were 35-33 lifetime record, average finish of seventh.
Weren't
But
they the 1 seed in 2022?
yeah, you'll
Yeah.
notice they've notoriously just failed to show up to the big game. They got lucky they won the lottery in 2022 so they could draft Brees Hall, but traded him away swiftly 2 years later. But they built a strong team in the time since 2021, and they just haven't been able to put when the lights come on, the Beavers, they just curl up into their dams and hide. Um, so let's go to their roster in 2021 so you can see what they were working with at the end of that season where they had yet to make playoffs. Um, so they had Joe Burrow at QB. They had Sony Michelle and Ronald Jones and Boston Scott were their running backs with Antonio Gibson on the bench. They had Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs at wide receiver. So they were cooking with gas. And then they had Dalton Schultz and Evan Ingram were their tight ends. So and Ingram hadn't quite broken out yet. He had that awesome rookie season with the Giants and then had done absolutely nothing since. They had made zero trades. They had all of their picks from 22, 23, and 24. Or they might have made trades. They hadn't traded any picks. So this kind of goes back to like what Dave's saying. A lot of teams have been really resistant to trading away picks or trading for picks, trading away players for picks. I think everyone's just too afraid to lose a deal on either side, where it's like, I would rather just lose with the guys I have or the picks I make than trade one and be wrong about the other, which I'm hoping that this roster reviews is inspiring people to take a different look at their teams and inquire, take more risks in trades. Haven't necessarily seen it come through yet in our league as much as I would like, but we have seen some trades. It's important to note that 22 first you see ended up becoming the 101 in Brees Hall. So if I go to their 2024, I don't have their 2024 roster. Shoot, let me add it right now. Where are they? The Beavers 2024 roster.
Well, while Joe pulls it up, I can read it.
I have it. Don't worry. All right. So now here's their 2024 roster. They have Joe Burrow at QB. They got Kyron Williams and Brian Robinson and Aaron Jones anchoring their running back room with Antonio Gibson on the bench. And their wide receivers are still Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs. Now they added T. Higgins to that room. And their tight end is Travis Kelce. So right away, their starting lineup, top to bottom, is strong. They have a very strong starting eight. They have two 2024 firsts, the 107, the 110, and then a couple fourths. They have no 2025 picks of value. They have a couple thirds, and then they have an extra 2026 first. So this team has a lot of options here, but they got some older players. Hill, Diggs, Kelsey are all over 30. Aaron Jones I think he's 29. Kyron and Brian Robinson are two younger but less proven backs. Although Kyron was an absolute stud last year. I don't want to take anything away from him, but kind of to what we've talked about in the past with guys like Rashad White and Nico and whoever, they've all done it once. So it's not necessarily a sure thing from here on out. But let's look at some of their trades since 2021. I mentioned they traded away Brees Hall. I should have included that trade. I'm surprised. Oh, I did include it. That was the big trade they made since 2021. I mentioned that they had a terrible team in 21. They got the 101, took Brees Hall. They traded him away, I think like week 5 or week 6 of this past year. Brees Hall in their 25 second for a 2024 first, which became the 107, a 2026 first, and T. Higgins. I think that was a pretty good haul for the Beavers, but I think it's about, looking at Brees Hall now, he's a top 6 redraft pick. That's probably what you got to pay for a 2022. He's 22 years old as well, which is like insane when you think about the fact that there's running backs in this year's class that are older than Brees Hall, and he was drafted 2 years ago. I included some trades where they kind of lost on here, but some of the other big ones where they traded away DJ Moore in the 201 and Evan Ingram for Travis Kelce in a third. That trade was a couple years ago. And I think at the time we all thought James sold short on Kelce. And it's funny how just looking at a trade 2 years later, DJ Moore is objectively worth more than Kelce by himself. And he's got the 201, or I think it was, I don't know what second that is, but maybe maybe it is a 201. Oh yeah, it is. It was James' second. DJ Moore, the 201, and Evan Ingram. That's a pretty good haul for Travis Kelsey now. So those are two trades that help reshape his roster. This has been one of our more competitive teams. Dave, again, take it from the top. What are you thinking?
It's an interesting team. At the time, I think I love the Brees Hall trade. I just wish he did something about the running back room. And this is actually, when we get to my team, this is the team I've thrown out the idea of acquiring older running backs, my running backs, because they didn't have the depth to ensure it. And they're the most risk laden. Where I have Eckler just got traded to the Commanders. Brian Robinson was top 24 last season. What happens this year? If there's a splitting, then he's probably not top 24 anymore. Kyron doesn't have a lot of draft value. So we've seen this where the James Robinsons, the Damian Pierce, like
Michael Carter,
they've all had top 12 seasons to then just do literally nothing the next season. Some reason a lot of people are saying Kyron's not going to be that case. And so I think last year we was trying to go for a championship. Made a lot of sense. It was a first to get Kyron in a third. He was a stud. So like the value from that trade was great. It's just a question of like, is he going to stay in that position? Tyreek, I'm not that worried about this season. Kelsey might retire. And then Diggs, super worried. Higgins, marginally worried. Jones, super worried. And so, I mean, from those stances, like Stephon Diggs is a crowded wide receiver room of just great receivers. I think CJ Stroud is a great quarterback. So I think that there's plenty of mouths that can be fed. But if he's consistently going for 4 to 5 for 60 yards, he's not a great wide receiver, but he might be productive for the team. And I just don't know how they're going to use him in Houston. He could be, again, still top 12. He could be top 6. Like, he could be amazing if they put Nico and Tank Dell further down on the depth chart and they really focal on Diggs. But I just don't know how it's going to play out. I love the contract restructuring. So curious how that plays out for Diggs. But concerns on Diggs. Kelsey might retire. And then Higgins, is he going to hold out? Like, how strongly is he really demanding a trade? It doesn't really happen that often in the NFL where you demand a trade and you actually get it, unless you're truly actually going to hold out, which we haven't seen many wide receivers do that I can recall. And then Aaron Jones, just like, he's not worth anything right now. Like, I don't think anyone's like, yeah, I'll come buy Aaron Jones for more than a third. And that might be overpaying for him right now. So you just kind of look at the roster. What else is there? If you stick with Schultz, now you're pretty heavy pushed into Texans and Bengals territory where you have Burrow, Higgins, Diggs, and Schultz. If you try to do something with Kelsey, or if Kelsey say retires, it begs the question: do you rebuild? And I don't want to say that that's like 100% the move he should take. Is I don't really know what he would keep and not keep. Like, obviously, you're not going to, if you are rebuilding, you're not going to keep Hill, Diggs, and you're probably not keeping Robinson and Williams. You're going to just get max value and try to rebuild fast because they have a lot of value. And like the running back room is just so unsure. Sell them now. Sell them almost pre-draft and see if what max value you can get. But I don't know. Like it's in that question of where we'll get to my team too, of this team on paper, minus Aaron Jones. They have the 107, the 110. Hopefully they can get a starter that's going to be top 24 in their position with at least one of those picks. Pop that in for Aaron Jones. They could make a run for the championship for sure on paper today. But like the things that really concern me is ignore even recency bias and like Burrow and stuff like that is Kyron, Robinson. If Kelsey's there, he's great. So it's really Kyron, Robinson, and Diggs are my biggest concerns, with lingering concerns for like Higgins and Joe Burrow. But the other three are like, I really just don't know until I see it. And once we see it, if they are, go. And the nice thing is your other pieces will still have value. Like, say this whole team shows up. If Kyron isn't the stud anymore, and if Robinson really isn't either, they lose a lot of value. But the rest of your team still doesn't, hopefully. Like, so you can hopefully still do some cool things with Tyreek, Diggs, Higgins. Hopefully Kelsey's there. You can get some pieces back for them that if you wanted to rebuild, you can do that. Or if you want, if Williams and Robinson aren't actually the true starters. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I like the 107, 110. Maybe they bundle those, go to get like a 105, a 104, see what they can do from that perspective. They could take the picks, but like this team is so fringe of if they don't win this year,
Yep.
this is a almost full sell, literally everything rebuild. Maybe you keep Burrow.
We're on the same page here. I think, first of all, I want to give a mini round of applause for their progress because I think they're one of the few teams who's gone from the bottom to a top team and stayed up there for a couple years now. And seemingly going into this season, they're going to have a strong team.
Yep.
But like you said, this team is thin. Probably the biggest bifurcation between their lineup quality and their bench quality is this team here, where they have a top 3, 4, 5 team on paper, just starters alone. They are not equipped to weather the storm when it comes to injuries at all. And I'm sorry, I don't think you can count on the 107 or the 110 to be a contributor in the event of injuries or bye weeks right away, unless you get lucky and you hit on the Devon A chain. But like that range has been guys that are usually developmental. You have like Michael Mayer goes in that range. You have Michael Carter goes in that range. Trey Sermon. You have it's just a lot of guys that
More.
Michael Pittman, who did nothing his rookie year. Christian Watson, like Jameson Williams, Traylon Burks. It's a lot of guys that are developmental pieces. I don't think you're going to find a guy you can plug in on a bye week. And so the two things I take away when I look at this roster is not having his own 2025 first really forces his hand. Again, this is another co-managed team. They need to go for it this year because they don't really have a choice. They can't say, let's start tearing it down because they're not going to get their 25 first back from Max because Max is unreasonable to trade with.
But that's the only thing I will say is you're right. They probably can't get it from Max. However, if there's one person who could use some of these pieces right now, it's Max. And so I think that one, he actually like if there's any pieces that he would be actually interested in, I think it would be some of these pieces and just remember his team. But I think that's one. But I think two, like I actually think that's where it's almost forces their hand the other way. Now looking at the 25, well maybe not 25 and 26, they have a couple of pieces, but like yeah, that's where I was like also like there where we talk about like the old guys max value might be in the middle of the season. I almost think his entire team's max value is right now pre-draft. Would you like? Is that weird to say?
No, I think. Well, I think you're right about Hill. I think Tyreek Hill's value retention is going to be just as strong now as it is in the season. I don't think you're going to get any more for him mid. Or maybe you would get more if you're selling to somebody like, maybe
desperate
like Austin's team. If their team has Garrett Wilson smashing and their 105 is smashing and Joe Mixon and Ken Walker is smashing, they're like, we're just.
They shouldn't be buying old guys, but yeah, I know what you mean.
If he's one good wide receiver away, maybe he can package up Jameson Williams, who's showing some sign of life, and they're 25. They have extra firsts, so maybe they do throw a first at him. But I think because of the not having your own first or second next year, it really forces your hand to say, I need to fill out this team. And I'm sorry, I don't think sticking in at 107 and 110 is going to fill out this roster. Because they still need a backup quarterback. They don't even have a quarterback on the roster. I think they've I don't know who their other quarterback is. They have Josh Dobbs or Matt Stafford or something that's not even. So I guess you could spend the 107 on Caleb. But then, like you said, they're stuck with a couple question marks at running back and old guys at wide receiver. Like, you really think you're going to have the 110 is going to be a plug and play start? It could be. It definitely could be. I'm not trying to say trade your picks away for nothing. I think you could get creative and trade away 110 for a guy like, Joe Mix. No, Joe Mix is not worth that much. So I'm trying to think of like a 27-year-old running back. Or 107 for like a Josh Jacobs, or 110 for like a Tony Pollard. Like, go get a guy who's a starter. Or go get a receiver like a Deebo Samuel. That's a good, go get somebody else.
I'm looking at that right now, to see like that's what I'm saying. Like he could probably get two starters potentially for those picks, or
Terry McLaurin.
If you wanted to get even younger, like you could go get Chris Olave.
Yeah, but you would need to give the 107 and the 110 to go get Chris Olave.
Yeah, but
which maybe they could do.
But that's what I'm trying to show is like,
yeah, you're right.
You do that, and then say you sell Diggs for. Hold on.
Joe Mixon. That's probably a fair swap.
No. Well, maybe, but I was trying to think more wide receivers, but like, say you sold him for George Pickens. So you're getting younger, but worse on paper, but you're getting younger. And now your team going into the season is Joe Burrow. So you still have the 2 young running backs. Hopefully they're good. They need to hit still.
Yeah.
You have Tyreek, you have Pickens, you have T. Higgins, and Olave. Your team instantly is now like young, youthful, and like you lose someone, not a big deal. But like,
Yeah.
It's kind of that creativity where he just needs to replace a couple of guys and he can get a little bit younger and worse if he wants to build for a couple of years to come and the running backs are going to hit. But I even offered him the same thing. Like I was offering him relatively cheaply. Do you want to acquire Eckler? I was like, I think he's going to be solid. I'm not looking for necessarily a straight up first, but like, what deal can we make to get you Eckler? Because you need that handicap right now for Robinson. Because like this traded for Eckler. Like,
you need that handicap guy. You need the handcuff, Dave, you fucking moron.
No, yeah, you need the handicap. Yeah, he is handicapped. That's fine.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, but like I was trying to say like, and I even said the other way. I said, I'll buy Robinson if you want to sell. Like, what do you want?
Right.
Do you want McCaffrey and you want to add a bunch of stuff to Robinson? Like, we can talk about that conversation.
Right.
So we were just creatively trying to do those different things. But I think that's their opportunity. Like, either go super young, try to get back to that young but build into mode, almost like where you are, which we'll get to your team in next episode. But I think that's the opportunity cost here, is that you're just so old and there's so many question marks. If you can alleviate some question marks for kind of sure young things that aren't sure to be top 12, but are sure to be like right now wide receiver 1, and Olave is a great option, or even wide receiver 2 that has an aging wide receiver 1, the Jalen Waddles, the Devontae Smiths, like
yeah.
A lot of those guys I think are a great target to go acquire and then sell your, and you might even be able to get a second round pick added on or a third. And like, now you can go take some shots at some people and hopefully you land something else that can help you. You land that Tank Dell, that Puka that just ends up being good. That wasn't a first round pick kind of person.
Yeah. I will say this is a team I don't want to face in playoffs because of how strong their lineup looks on paper. Their starters look on paper. I said this is a lineup I don't want to face. Now the managers themselves, I just know they're going to find a way to shit it away. So I'm totally okay facing the Beavers management group. But yeah, so that's how I feel. I think you get creative with the 107 or the 110. I do still think you need to address quarterback. Like you said, Joe Burrow has injury concerns, and they don't have another quarterback worth starting. God forbid they can't suffer an injury.
Listen, this is my number one trade partner opportunity.
If they have an injury to Kelsey or Burrow, they are fucked. And they like this is a team that they don't need to worry about going 14-0. They don't need to worry about going. They just need to get into playoffs, because if they get into playoffs, Tyreek Hill can win you a week. Kyron Shoney can win you a week. Travis Kelce can win you a week. You can't have that debilitating season-ending injury and have no way to insulate your or protect yourself from that. And I think I would hate to spend the 107 on a QB, but that's what you might have to do. Like, or you trade it for a QB and a good deal. You just mentioned, I don't like to use our teams as examples, but if he trades away the 110, he could probably get Brock Purdy and Eckler for the 110. Like because Eckler's probably worth a second, Purdy's probably worth a second. That's probably about a fair-ish swap. I'm not saying you would do that. I'm just saying like that type of deal where he fills 2 holes with 1 pick. We all love filling 2. Never mind. Anyways, I think we've covered a lot about the Beavers. I think we came up with some strategies for them. I really weirdly enough, like this team, even though it's so polar opposite for me, because I like they've built such a strong core. They did it from the depths of where the mermen are trying to come out of right now. So
yeah.
But yeah, I'm ready to move on to the crown jewel of the episode.
Let's get to the Apes.
Let's go to the Bentonville Board Apes. This team, for those of you at home, is the winningest team in our league history. Probably, admittedly, the most well-run team in terms of they always put themselves in a position to win. So Dave, if you don't mind, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to go through the same stuff I normally do, but instead of throwing it over to you, I'm going to go through and do my initial diagnosis of your team as if I was taking it over, and then you can talk through. Tell me.
Do you want me to go through
the
team? You want me to go through the old teams?
No. I'll keep doing it, and then we go through you can talk about your thoughts on your strengths and weaknesses, and we can go back and forth on some strategies. But I think it'd be a good way to kind of be like, okay, let's see if I were taking your team over, what I might do, and see if it's something new for you, or if it's something that you've already been thinking about, which I know you're always thinking. So I'm assuming it'll be nothing new for you. But
send it.
So looking through this team's history, they've come in fifth, first in 2020. This is our first championship team we're reviewing. Fourth, fifth, and third. They've had 3 11-win seasons. They have a 47-20 career record, 69% winning percentage. I mean,
Nice.
and the crazy thing is, this manager, our co-host Disaster, has overhauled his lineup a number of times. If you recall from one of our first episodes, he drafted Mahomes in the startup. He drafted, I don't remember, but at one point you had Saquon on your team. Then you traded Saquon away. You didn't draft Henry. You traded Zach Ertz away for Henry. Like in our first season, you traded away for a bunch of picks. Still made playoffs. You've made so many crazy deals, and it's always like, I'm not saying you're a win now only focused manager, but you always find a way to put yourself in a team to be competitive. Because I think you've realized, if nobody else is going to push their chips in to win, I don't have to push that many in to stay competitive.
That's
Our
dude. That's yes, and then we'll get into that. But
yes.
100%, that has been what that to me in this season has been kind of the toughest thing, because my guys are actually getting old, but it is that thing, like no one else is really going for it, so I might as well just go for it.
Starting from the top, we got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, who is coming off an MVP season. We have Ezekiel Elliott and Elijah Mitchell anchoring his RB room, which this is prime Zeke. Elijah Mitchell was the RB1 in San Francisco at the time. Devontae Adams and Terry McLaurin and Hollywood Brown. This was Devontae was fucking eating that year. I think he had like a 22 points per game or something ridiculous. You had Derrick Henry was on IR, who was normally your RB2, and you still made playoffs when Henry missed half a season. You had Brandon Cooks on the bench, Tua on the bench. Darren Waller was still hadn't retired yet. And your picks at the time, you had Max's 22 first, which was a pick swap. So you were taking the lower of the two firsts. You had a 22 second, 23 first, and all your 24 picks. So this was a great roster that was constructed in a way that you didn't have to forego any picks to build. So let's look at your roster today and see what everybody, we've been talking about it for a few episodes now. It'll be nice to finally call out your entire lineup to the audience. So you got Brock Purdy and Tua Tagovailoa are your quarterbacks. You got CMC, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler. Your running backs are just, again, like you said, they're on the older side. They're collectively almost 100 years old. But they're studs. They're all top. Well, CMC is the 101 in redraft this year. You got Derrick Henry is probably going to be a second, third round pick by the time most people catch up to the Ravens signing. Wide receiver room, you got Devontae still anchoring it. You got Tank Dell, George Pickens, Terry McLaurin, Rashee Rice, Mike Williams, Brandon Cooks. Like, you have the depth at wide receiver. You have the great blend of old and young. And as we go to your picks, you got the 210 this year, 310 this year. You have 2 seconds in 2025, not your own. And you have no first or second in 2026. So looking at this guy's picks, Disaster has no firsts for the next 3 years. But we'll get to why. And I think it's been a really creative deployment of capital. If we go to some of his trades, and I'm going to pull up his trade window. The biggest trades on here I have highlighted. If you want to see a trade, how he acquired a couple firsts a couple years ago, that he had an Alvin Kamara for a Zeke trade a couple years ago. The big one was acquiring Christian last August. The Apes acquired Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Elijah Mitchell, and Darren Waller for Alvin Kamara, a bunch of trash cans, a 2024 first, and a 2025 first. That trade, again, it's one of those trades that was a small trade to keep his team competitive, which is kind of what we were talking about in the pre-analysis, which is this manager always seems to find a way to make his team relevant without having to mortgage his entire future. And then, bravo. Here's 2 more trades I'm going to go through right now. Very, very simple trades that he made last year early in the season. He traded away his 2025 first straight up for Tank Dell. I think that was in week 5, whenever Tank Dell had gone off for that huge game, his first big game. And then shortly after, or maybe before, he traded away his 2026 first for Rashee Rice and a second. two trades that took a ton of guts because uh, he was able to pick up two guys who are now revered as top 25 assets. I mean, we still have to find out what's happening to Rashee Rice's um, court case, and Tank Dell getting Stephon Diggs added to his room is certainly not what you want. But I think these are the type of deals that I think a lot of the managers in our league are. Again, we've talked about it a number of times. They're scared to make, they're reluctant to make for good reason, because they can burn you. But a lot of other managers seeing the way Tank Dell popped off, seeing the way Rashee Rice was getting his target volume per route run was going up, and a lot of managers might say, those are two guys I have my eyes on. Let me try to throw a late second for him. And Dave goes, and the other manager's going to go, no effing way. I spent a second on these guys. Why would I trade them for a second? And if another manager might say, well, you know what? I'm going to wait and see. Because what if Tank Dell is nothing? Then I don't want to spend a first. Well, you know what happens if you wait and see on Tank Dell? Now you have to pay 2 firsts to get Tank Dell. You can't get Tank Dell for a single first anymore. So that's the problem with the whole wait and see mentality that I think a lot of managers in our league take, which is, oh, I want to wait and see if my team is good, or I want to wait and see if this guy is actually a good legit before I spend on him, or I want to see if my guy pans out before I trade him away for a third. And it's like, at some point you have to be okay with losing some future value to put your sword in the sand, put your put your nuts on the table, and make a fucking adult move. I think these are the two best trades you've ever made. Um,
I mean, Rashee Rice, as long as he doesn't go to jail for 20 years, looks like a fleece job. But yeah, if he does go to jail for 10 years, then I fucking lost that trade all
But
day.
even still, that's not even that's an unforeseen, like, every player has the risk of going to jail. How are we going to possibly quantify that as a risk premium that I have to pay on the top of the trade? So it's like, on paper, it's a great trade, and I think those are the types of deals that, yeah, of course, Tank Dell could have been. I don't know. I can't think of Christian Watson, who also had a really strong stretch in his rookie year, and if you paid that first for Christian Watson last year, you'd be kicking yourself because he's done fucking nothing since. But, like, also due to injury, which we'll get to when we get to Gilday's team, but the Sasquatch. But so those are some of the trades that got his roster to where they are today. So let's move on to the analysis. I'm coming in, Sultan's stepping in. I'm taking over the Apes. What's the first thing I'm doing? I'm looking at my team, and I'm really happy that I'm contending. I'm excited that I have a good mix of players that gives me a lot of flexibility around the way I want to go. Knowing I have this many receivers, it means somebody else out there is deficient. If I have 6 or 7 guys I know I can start confidently, there's no way there's many other managers that can. If you take a look around the league, you'll see maybe 3 or 4 other managers that have 6 receivers they can start, and then it falls off. And a lot of guys think they have guys that they can start. Sorry, 10 points per game is not startable in an 8 start 8 lineup. I mean, it's startable, but it's not what you want to be starting.
Yeah, they have Brandon Cooks starting instead of on the bench.
Right. That's not what you want. You want Cooks as your bye week plug-in, your injury flex.
Your wide receiver 7.
Yes. So I'm saying I have a few directions I can take this team. I don't love not having any future firsts, but if I'm not going to have firsts, I like having a few guys that are worth firsts. I'd probably survey the league. I look around, I see 3 to 4 true contenders besides myself, and I say I can hang with them with this lineup because of so much injury variance that happens. I don't think I can afford to really consolidate anymore. So I think if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to try to creatively tier down and pick up some capital, because I think I have enough strong players that I can still field a good team while kind of slowly inching towards. I don't think this team can make any dramatic moves to pick up youth or capital. I think it's got to be the slow and steady route where, it's probably not a good example, but I wish I actually had prepped some trades ahead of time, but, like, maybe you trade Devontae for a guy like Terry McLaurin in a second, and you're like, I'm losing a few points, but I'm tearing down a couple years, and I'm getting that one extra little. It seems cheap to the guy giving up the other guy's getting a good tier up, and I'm picking up what I want, which is the second round pick capital. And eventually maybe I can go trade George Pickens in a second to a team that, if my guys are all smashing, I can trade George Pickens in a second for a first later. And that's how I might try to reel in some capital. But I'm only getting that capital so I can trade it again later. Like just the way that this team's structured, why make a rookie pick when I've done such a good job trading for studs, scouting studs ahead of time and trading for them. Um, and if I'm gonna start going for I don't think I want to tear down this team, but if I'm gonna tear down this team, uh, the first thing I have to do is get my own first back for next year. I'm not going to tear down my team without getting my own first back. That's the first thing. Because as soon as you start tearing down your roster without your own first, the owner of your first is going to go, well, now you're tearing it down. Why the fuck would I give you your pick back? Your price of your pick goes up every time you tear your team down without getting your own. So the first move you have to make is you have to go for your own pick, which I don't know who owns it, but that's what you have to do first, and then you can start piecemealing the rest of the pieces out below market value, even if that's the way you want to go. But I don't think I would take the team that way. I think I would stay competitive. My two questions to you would be, you know, I know you said you're comfortable with your QBs, but truthfully, you don't have a top end QB1 in a one QB league. You're unless you I don't think I would feel comfortable with Tua or Brock as my QB1 unless I was fucking loaded everywhere else. And I'd say you have some studs like Devontae and McCaffrey and Henry, but your wide receiver 2 flex are not studs by definition. Your tight end is not a stud by definition. So I'd be like, how am I going to address my QB room? Because I don't necessarily think I think Purdy and Tua are probably the weakest QB starters across the league. I think there's probably 8 or 9 other QBs I'd rather start than them. So it's like, and same thing with your tight end room where it's like Ferguson is fine, but he's like what, tight end 10, maybe 11? Like it's like, yes, of course he's a serviceable good tight end, but he's not a difference maker. And it's like, do I really think how do I upgrade those two? One of those two onesie positions would be my ultimate goal, which sounds so weird in a one quarterback league thinking about upgrading quarterback, but like we've seen the difference making production that a guy like Lamar, a guy like Richardson, a guy like Hurts, a guy like Josh Allen can provide on a week to week basis. And Purdy and Tua just aren't doing that unless they're throwing for 4 or 5 touchdowns. So like, how am I getting to that? One of those, my focus would be upgrading tight end or quarterback. That'd be the sole focus of trying to be competitive this offseason.
Interesting take. So Purdy was 6 last year, which feels like the question mark there is, Matt has Gilday has Hurts. You have Lamar, and I think Brent has Josh Allen. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So those 3 objectively are not for sale unless I'm going to really overpay. And so top 3 of the 5, we'll say, are projecting or are off the board. I think just personally, and then Mahomes is with Max, which again, probably not making that deal with him because he's going to overvalue.
He's a Dolphins fan.
True. So like maybe, and you can lock that up for a couple of years. That like, okay, so potentially you can get him. But say Mahomes is kind of off the board too. I don't know who QB 5 through 8 is. And I think that you're right. A piece of me, what I've been trying to do, candidly, is to trade either Brock or Tua. I'm comfortable starting either. Right now, my tentative starter kind of is Brock just based on his performance last year, but like I'm okay with either. I think both are great. Tua having a passing record last year, leading in all passing yards last year is like hard not to want to start him. So I think both of them could be QB5. And again, Brock was QB6 last year. So it's hard to be like, who am I acquiring? And it's either I'm acquiring that rookie that could get there, a la Richardson, or maybe I go try to trade for Stroud because I think Stroud can make a big jump to be QB5, whatever. Like, I think there are options out there, but it's like, why am I going to spend against that? Where like Tua and Brock are in great situations, amazing head coaches, amazing teams around them. Right now, Stroud's kind of that other person I would say is like in that ballpark of like those 3 are, and there's probably a couple others, like Herbert was that until all the pieces left. But like you have a couple QBs like that are just this young-ish, maybe less than 5 years in the league, that have an amazing team, maybe amazing head coach around them that should be there for the long haul. And they might not be QB1 because they're just not as skilled or they don't do all the running or whatever else it is. But there's just so many other amazing pieces there. So I think that's a tough one. I think the tight end's a great call out. Candidly, I tried a lot not a lot. I'd say I tried decently to get Sam Laporta from the Nessies. Or is
Yep.
it Nessies? Yeah,
Yep.
Nessies. And so, but it's identifying those pieces. Like, I would love to get McBride from you. I don't think you're going to sell him. So, like, and I also don't really want to trade with you. So, fuck you. So, I haven't
you
made an
too,
offer.
bud.
So, I haven't made an offer. But yeah, I've been trying to acquire Sam Laporta in different opportunities, and I've been looking for the other piece. But like, I think it's also this weird dynamic. What if Mark Andrews is hurt? Or what if Mark Andrews is now in tight end split, where they're doing double tight end with Henry in the back, and Lamar's doing a lot of his play action
RPOs.
RPOs, where now likely he's just getting half the targets and Mark Andrews isn't as good. And then you have Kittle, who's just kind of like old and has a 40-point game, then has a 0-point game. And who's left? And I kind of like Ferguson's not going to be probably tight end one.
I mean, we are moving to tight end premium, so it does make it
sure
this year. But
I think it's going to be Laporta, McBride. But like, I think Ferguson now gives me that opportunity where like, could he be tight end 6? Probably.
Yeah.
If some things fall right. So it's kind of like, again, like, is he lighting the world on fire? No. Can I acquire? And that's the other piece that I think I challenge you is like, do I have those pieces to acquire? Could I probably go get Trey McBride for you for like some of these old guys that are just absolute studs, like a CMC and something else or whatever to get McBride? I'm sure I could have the pieces to pay for it. Is that overpayment worth it? Probably not. And that's proven. And so it's kind of like if I had one piece and it was Laporta that I'd want to bet on, even though the Lions have like an aging Jared Goff, they still have questions kind of around the rest of the team as far as what they're actually going to be doing. But like Gibbs looks good. So is he going to start getting a lot more? They still have Montgomery. They still have St. Brown. Like, how much is Laporta actually going to get? Do injuries factor in? I don't know. Like, he's one of the tight ends that I'd factor into, but I think there is this kind of gap of where there just is going to be a lot of these 10-point tight ends. And there's still going to be the couple studs that are doing 13, 14, but there's a lot of 10s. And I think Ferguson's in that wheelhouse of like 8 to 12 a game where like it's okay. So I haven't addressed it. I've been thinking about it. That's a really good point. Haven't addressed it. I
hijacked you earlier. I'm sorry. So I guess I'm sorry if you had a thought you were about to say, but the initial thing I wanted you to talk through, if you had a chance, was talk through your team in general, just your strengths and weaknesses. Like I threw those questions out too soon. That's my mistake.
Oh, no. So yeah. Okay. So, my strength is obviously my running back room. You know, like they have been for the last 3 seasons or probably 4 seasons. And so that's been them and Devontae have been the staples of my team that I've been riding on and kind of just been floating other players around them. I've had McLaurin now for a long time. I've had Brandon Cooks for a long time. That's kind of my core group I've been rolling with. The weakness is I think is just looking 2 years ahead. I don't know if anyone on this team is still here outside of maybe my quarterbacks, you know, and even them could be tradable. As I said, they're all tradable right now. But like, I really just don't know what's going to happen. I would assume Dell and Rice are going to stick here, assuming Rice isn't in jail and Dell just recovers and Diggs fucks off from the Texans. I feel pretty good about them. But I think that is the challenge of like, can they stay? And we've seen this not so much with wide receivers. We see a lot more with running backs, but wide receiver is a question mark of like, are they going to stay wide receiver 1? Are they going to stay wide receiver 2? Is their QB going to keep performing at a good level? Does the defensive coordinators now have a full season on CJ Stroud that CJ Stroud is going to have a bad sophomore season, which usually they do? And so kind of these question marks of how are some certain things going to fold into this season? But yeah, my biggest weakness is going to be is a combination of youth and eliteness is what I'm missing. And so actually the one thing that I do think that I'm considering doing, right, is what if I took Terry McLaurin and Tank Dell, bundle them together to someone that needs depth and went and got a Jamar Chase a la AJ Brown, a la whatever, and said, hey, okay, I'm going to give you Tank Dell. I'm going to give you Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's been top 24 basically forever. So he's guaranteed starter. For you, and then Tank Dell could be top 12 as youthful building into it. So you have 2 solid, probably top 24 wide receivers, with one being very young and on the uptrend, to go get a 4 or 5 year guy that's 24, 25, 26 to give me a few years. You might get a lot of years, but I'm buying the experience and like the semi-certainty of performance to hopefully kind of lock in a top 8 guy. Because that has been Devontae. And the toughest thing for me projecting into the future, I've always had Devontae is really always top 5.
Yeah.
And that to me is the only person that's really still in that camp is Jefferson. There really isn't another. He's the only true next Devontae. I can't think of anyone that's like there's there.
Yeah, no one else has done it.
Maybe Tyreek. I guess Tyreek's kind of in that same camp, but like
He's 30, so
right. I'm saying like in the current young age, really
any receivers that have done it. Yeah.
No. I'm saying like that's why I kind of threw Tyreek in there. But like really, of the people that are still young now that I would go acquire that actually are Devontae is Jefferson. These others, the Chases, the Browns, whatever, that are like very good, but like Jefferson is the one that like you think is going to be always top 5 every single season. Everyone else is like they're wide receiver 1 and they're probably top 10. But like where they fall, they could be 1, they could be 10 in a season, but Jefferson you kind of predict is always top 5 kind of situation. So that's the one piece that I think I've gotten very comfortable with. My biggest fear is not replacing that and having to navigate what does that look like? Because Devontae has been pretty much a wide receiver top 5, top 3, even most seasons for me since I started this league 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's such a comfortable 18 to 22 points that like I can't bank on anymore. My best wide receiver might only be getting me 15, which is just scary. And so I think that for me, the other piece I'm really looking at is do I bundle a couple, try to stage up in the wide receiver game. The other thing I was saying from before is as I'm trying to trade is I think if you look at a lot of things, right, is potentially what I'm trying to do right now. I'm still filling out some stuff. I might make a trade. But the 3 pieces we didn't talk about my 3 taxi running backs. Do you have any thoughts on them?
Without putting it nicely, I think they're all worth a couple dollars a fab each.
That's fine. I think they all could be starters in 2 years, and I don't have any evidence to prove that.
They could.
I think Jaleel McLaughlin's got a lot of potential. He's shown some stuff with Denver. I think Chris Rodriguez is just a very crowded background, so if he can stick around and then
Chris Rodriguez is awful. The other 2, at least Bigsby and McLaughlin, have either shown some signs of efficiency or have decent draft capital to say the stars align. ETN blows out his knee. Bigsby probably gets a chance to earn that job. McLaughlin showed
about Chris Rodriguez.
Chris Rodriguez is an actual trash can. He was like the slowest running back in combine history or something. Just like I'm making that up, but like he was so bad.
Where did you get that fact? I made it up.
Yeah, well, you know what? If you say with enough conviction, everyone fucking believes.
That's true. Okay? That's true. All right. So, anyways, so I think those are question marks that I have on my taxi squad right now, and I think that for me, it's wait for the draft. Again, to what I was saying from before, McCaffrey, Henry, Devontae are not losing their jobs. Eckler was just traded for. I'm assuming he's going to be at least in a share, potentially the lead back for the Commanders.
But he's definitely going to be the passing down back.
And he's at least in a split backfield at worst. And again, in a PPR league, he's going to be the passing down back. So I have 4 guys that I am 99% confident are not going to lose value post-draft. Everyone else probably does not have that for most of the starters. And so my real threshold I'm trying to probably make a lot of trades is right after the draft, pre our rookie draft, because rookie draft picks unpicked are worth less than the player picked. Like
worth more. Because you have the flex the players in it.
No,
if I pick a running back at 109, you might say I don't want that running back. Like, I don't want that. But if the 109 is worth all of those receivers that it could be.
Yeah, so I actually think it's worth less for that reason, because like outside of the 101 to maybe the 103, where we kind of had the prediction of who they are, once you get to the 109, I don't know who's going to be available. So if I'm targeting 3 guys I predict left and they all go 104, 105, 106, now the 109 is not worth as much to me.
Saying. Right.
But versus if I know I want, Malik Neighbors is stuck in my head, but say it's Malik Neighbors, but it's actually not. Say it's what's the Adi something?
Rome Odunze?
No.
Adonai Mitchell?
Yeah, Adonai Mitchell. Say it's Adonai Mitchell I really want. I'm targeting him, or whatever Max guys is Xavier Worthy. So like say it's one of those guys, I don't know exactly where they're going to be drafted. It's hard for me to get that pick for them. But once I know I want them, well, now that person knows, okay, you want this player versus you just want to pick and hopefully you can acquire the player you want, is kind of that curveball where the pick technically in my eyes, I see what you're saying about it's actually worth more. I think it's actually worth less to a lot of managers because they don't know, especially, and maybe for you it's worth more because you know the potential. A lot of our league does not know what the potential of some of their picks. And so for me, I think it's where it's worth less in our trading system because they don't know who that player is going to be. But once they know it's a player, they know it's in a team, they know they're projected to be the wide receiver 2 or the wide receiver 1 or RB1,
Yeah.
like that value skyrockets.
I think it's more clear for sure. I do think though that if I'm trading for the 109, it's because it has the potential to be a QB, a wide receiver, or a running back, or whatever. A QB or a running back is kind of what I said in the last episode when we went over it. When I trade for the 109, is because I was like, I think that looks like where QB1 or RB1 is going to go. But if you still have the 109 and I'm trying to trade with you and you're like, well, I actually just picked Lad McConkey. Do you still want the pick? I'm like, no, I wanted QB or running back. Now I no longer want your fucking 109.
Yes, no. The absolute best value for that pick is on the clock. 100 or like right before on the clock, right after that pick's made. That is the maximum value for that pick. So sure, that is where it is peak. I think
It's
now,
so flexible.
I think even after the draft, those picks are still so undervalued compared to the actual player because once you know the player you want, that's where it's going to be max value as opposed to the draft pick. So I think that to me is where I'm going to try to make a lot of my trades, if anything, is to like bet out. And for me, to the OTQ we asked earlier, it's really just asking that question of, okay, what is the value I want to acquire back? And if it's in a fair ballpark of what I actually want to be, probably within 5-10%, that's where I kind of hit accept. And if it's not there, I'm competing for the championship. But to your point, and this is the thing, I don't want to give away the alpha, but okay, one of the alphas I have that is let me build what I built, and we're getting about an hour and a half in, which is fine. We also have a pause, and then I got to cut some things out. So one of the things that I've always levered on that people I don't think about, right after the draft, you get a first round pick. Oh, you're back. Sorry.
One of the alphas.
Lost you.
You got last thing I heard was one of the alphas. So I don't want to give away the alpha, but one of the alphas.
Okay, so perfect. I just kind of stalled on that. That's great. I'm not going to cut anything on this one. But yeah, one of the alphas I think that for me is right after the draft, you get a first round pick. And I have been a seller of that first round pick almost not immediately, but with it, by November, that pick has been gone the last 20 seasons.
You're like, fuck them picks.
Yeah, because it's 3 years out. I don't really give a shit. And it's the fortunate nature of our league currently is the 2027 pick doesn't matter compared to the 2025 first round pick unless it's picking season. Mm-hmm. And so if it's the middle of this, if it's September, they're like, all right, stick it. I don't give a shit. Give me a first rounder. All right, here's my first round from 27. And I'm like, yeah. I'm in. And I'm like,
the same way. We'll get to it when we get to my team too.
Yeah.
I've traded away my future picks for current picks every year.
Yeah, sure. And so my value though is like, if they're going to value that the same and I can go acquire, so that means in my team right now, I can go acquire a player for a first round pick and however our league values them, but I can acquire a first round talent as soon as the draft's over. And so it's just kind of that mode every season. I have that. And so that's kind of the mode that I've been living in of if I can keep evolving. And I think that last year was kind of the first time where I really had a couple first round picks lingering where I was like, all right, my team was looking a little old. I was like, I should probably get some youth in this joint. And that's where I took some risks on some players that I felt really confident. And actually, the funny thing was, if you want a story about it, I went for Puka. I think I offered Brian before the season a first round pick.
No,
and
I think it was like week 2, like or week 1, right after he had that 15 target game. He showed me the trade. He was like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah, I offered him a big trade at week 2, but I at least offered him a second round pick preseason, and I said, "Hey, I'll give you a second for him." And he got him off waivers for like $1.
Yeah,
and he's like, "I don't know, man. I think I'm gonna hold him." I was like, "All right, well, I'm not jumping to a first," and I think I might have even gone to a second and a fourth, and he still passed. And then at week 2, I offered him a first, a second, and I think even a third for Puka. And he was just like, dude, that's such a good offer. And I know I should take it because he's only 2 weeks in and Cooper Kupp's not here. But he's like, I'm going to let it play out. And I was like, all right, man, like, I'd love to offer more. I really don't have the pieces for it. I'm not doing 2 firsts for a guy that's had 2 games in the NFL, but like, I get it. And so after that instinctive kind of like, it's kind of where like you play a game and okay, I've already proven that out. Puka had started to go off this trajectory. I was like, fuck, I wish I put, 2 seconds in a first for this guy because he was so fucking good. I started saying, okay, I had 2 other guys on my board I wanted. It was Tank Dell, and actually it was Rashee Rice. And then what I was actually trying to acquire from Max was Debo. And so I put the exact same offer. I put a first for Debo or a first for Tank Dell. And he said something about Debo. And I was like, all right, man, well then take the Dell offer. And he's like, you're really offering me a first for Tank Dell? I was like, yeah. He's like, all right. Fucking whatever. I was like, all right, man. Like,
Yeah, now you
thanks.
look like a genius.
And so I was like, that was the easiest deal of all time. But I think, and that was kind of one of the things we talked about last episode of like the bait and switch, where I just made the exact same offer for 2 very different prospects. Like Debo is like, I'd say arguably in a redraft league, top 12 when he was going into at least last season.
Yeah.
And Tank Dell was kind of like, who?
Right.
And so for me, at like about week 4 or 5, whatever he said it was September 25th. I don't know what week that is, but like, so
Like week
September
3 or 4.
25th, he made the trade. And I had both those out there. And then he commented first on Sam, was like, all right, well, I have another offer. And he looked at it. And that's just where it was like, yeah, sure, instantly accept. I might have been able to get a second and a third instead. But I was like, I learned from the Puka thing where I think I offered Brian a fair value for Puka in both those trades.
Definitely.
And he was hesitant. Whereas in these trades, I tried to offer above value. And to your point, lose the trade at the beginning because I had more value than what the paper would say I should trade for them. And I actually ended up getting a little more for Rice than I probably should have. But for Dell, I was like, no, I'm just going to make the offer I want to make. And it was after hearing that CJ Stroud requested him after being drafted by the Texans. I was like, that doesn't happen very often. And they already seem to have a little bit of synergy. I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to do it. And it's going to seem like, wow, what a win for him, hopefully. And it did. And then that's where we got the trade accepted. So I think that's kind of the alpha, though, is like you always are going to get a first after the draft. And that first is right now in the league valued about the same no matter the year until it actually has a number associated with it. Then like everything's fucking way overvalued. And yeah, that's where like if I look at my team, I don't really need to replace anybody today, And so if I have that first lingering, if McCaffrey goes down, we'll want to have Mitchell. But if Henry goes down, I don't have Keaton Mitchell. And so I think that's kind of the opportunity is like, can I go buy someone for that first? Can I go do whatever to make that work? Go get Joe Mixon. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think we're getting up against it. But I really appreciate the insight into your own team. I think you made a lot of good points about things to consider. And you sparked something in my head that I think is funny about Puka. I think Puka, and no disrespect, Bohm, but I think Puka is the best and worst thing to ever happen to the Mermen. The greatest thing for rebuilding that franchise. But now every single bit of news about a single prospect that he took in the third or picked up off waivers that he could possibly cash in for some value, he's going to say, oh, but what if it's Puka? What if I have the next Puka again? I can't trade him for a second. Like I can't possibly trade away my 2025, 26 first round pick. What if that becomes the 101 and it's the next Marvin Harris? Like there's just going to be this like squeezing extra tight of all these things because he saw it happen. He saw the shit turn to gold. And it's like, well, now I can't possibly make another deal. I have to hold everything just in case. And it's like, no, you should be still trying to cash in when you can. Like the Puka one was a crazy. It's in hindsight. Thank God he didn't trade away Puka for a first and second because that would have felt really bad for him right now. But my God, there's so many situations where that's probably the right process play. But maybe we're getting to a new age of football where rookies come in and they can produce right away. And that's a consistent indication of who they're going to be. And it's no longer a flash in the pan or a fluke. I guess it remains to be seen. We'll see what happens to guys like Puka and Tank and Nico and all these guys who smashed last year and be like, are they going to do it again? Or
But it's funny you say that. None of them were first round picks.
Yeah.
That was a second, a third, and a waiver wire.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Tank might have been a fourth pick, but
right.
401.
And none of them were first round picks in the NFL draft either, which is
also
fun.
And so I think it's an interesting dynamic where like, yeah, I think so. I was listening to another podcast. And they were talking about how
dare you listen to another podcast besides ours?
I know, stealing all their alpha. But one thing they did stats on, it was, I think it's on average about once every 2 seasons, a rookie wide receiver is a top 12 wide receiver. And it's something of like 80% of the running backs, rookie running backs, a rookie running back is a top 12 running back. And
Yep.
so that weird little hit there too, but not quite the same point you were trying to make. But it is interesting that we've seen some of these guys pop off so well last year. How does that turn this year? Where this year everyone's like, this wide receiver class is nuts. They're going to be insane. And like the top 3 guys are already projected in the top 15 of even redraft leagues and like also the crazy shit. I just it's curious to see. It'd be weird if we had 3 of those guys last year that all made valuable starts for fantasy and for their own teams, to not have at least 1 or 2 come from this year that are actually second, third, fourth round picks or waiver ads that have impact. Not
Yeah.
that anyone's going to be Puka. I think Puka is 100% a fluke, but Tank Dell, Rashee Rice, where they slowly grow, they become great kind of towards the end of the season. You can see where their sophomore, junior season, we're expecting them to be very good. Curious to see how that pans out, but
Yeah,
it was a good season last season for the rookies.
Oh, I'm excited. It was, that's the Bentonville Board Apes. They're the most celebrated teams in the People Don't Forget Dynasty Leagues. You got to talk to their commish. So Dave, thanks for breaking down your roster. And next week we get to do the same with mine. So I'm looking forward to it. And catch you next time.
See you later, bud.